else has joined. A few people have sent in questions already. I am going to. Oh yeah, this was an interesting one to start off with. Questions about, so we've had a number come in already, so some people are able to join us live, and then some of them asked previously. I've got a couple from they've been sent in from the WhatsApp group. There's been some from YouTube, and I guess we'll just dive in and start answering some of these bad boys. So first up, breakfast and post-workout meal for someone who doesn't eat dairy products and protein shakes.
Yes, good question. So that is obviously a little bit limiting, but there's a ton of different plant protein options. We talk about in the course how plant protein is not always a complete source of protein. So it's really being mindful of making sure you're getting a variety of different things. So some really good options. If you do eggs, I know sometimes with dairy, they assume that means eggs too, but if you do eggs, eggs are a great option. If you don't do eggs, you can do things like any type of soy product. So like soy milk in a type of shake. So if you're doing like some fruit with some soy milk, any type of nuts and beans are really good. A good like breakfast hash, kind of similar to one you always make using tofu instead, is always a great option there. So some tofu or some veg are all really good options as well.
Yeah. So mentioning, you did mention that my breakfast hash is one of, I do eat meat, but try to eat like high quality stuff, grass fed where possible, and organic. And yeah, but the breakfast hash that I like to put together is one of the recipes that's in the new nutrition course. One of the things, I'm a massive fan of oats, and there was another question coming on the WhatsApp group was about just linked to this. It was about breakfast ideas, and it just made me think specifically of my love of oats, but also the overnight oats options that you've put together to potentially talk through them as an option. And they also asked about post-workout meals, and there's a number of shakes that you've put together for us. So it'd be great to just cover them. I think quickly would be great.
Yeah, so the different shakes we have on there, we have our green smoothie, which I love a lot. It brings in like avocados and lots of spinach and greens like that. So it makes for a really good vegan or vegetarian option. And again, like in that video, I talk about the different types of liquid you can use. So in that case, that's definitely when I would be using the soy milk. So it's a little bit higher in protein as compared to like your almond milks or cashew milks or coconut milk. So bumping up the protein in that way. And then we have a beet powder one, which is really fun because it's all bright and colorful. And we talk about how beets are really good at opening up blood vessels. So it helps deliver nutrients and oxygen to all those tissues after your workout. So it's really helpful in that way.
So just like beet, as in beetroot, a lot of people, that's what we're talking about, yeah, beetroot.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So you can either use like a beetroot powder, there's powders these days, or if you want to go all out and get some whole beets, obviously just like cooked first so they're nice and soft. We don't put raw beets in the blender, but those work as well. But good options. And then the last one we go over in that is the banana peanut butter, which is kind of just a classic. But
yeah, that is like it's naughty. I have to curb my like sort of banana peanut butter.
You got to watch the peanut butter. Right?
Yeah, I managed to wean myself off. Like anything in too much excess is not great, right? So I managed to get myself away from it, and then you encouraged me to get back on it. And it's my own discipline to just be like, have it in a sensible amount, Jackie. You don't have to go overboard. One of the ones for me was like I quite like green smoothies for like getting in vegetables that I either maybe don't necessarily enjoy eating that much, but know that they're good for me. But so I put in a lot of spinach, broccoli, beetroot, carrots, things into smoothies, and make something that like it might not be the most deliciously tasting thing, but I can enjoy it enough. And a lot of the enjoyment is knowing that I'm getting a lot of good nutrients in there.
Yeah, and that's what I love about shakes and smoothies. Like you can put so much into one glass, and like you said, I mean, you can make it enjoyable, but for some reason, it's not the most enjoyable thing. Like you're getting a big bang for your buck in one little jar. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that what was a little bit of a for me was on one of the rest of the scene for you was when the avocado in the smoothie adds a texture that I just not, but I'm quite precious with my avocados. I like avocado that much that I sort of, I then become in a dilemma. It's like, I want to eat it with like some egg or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Did you try it though? I like the texture. It makes it really nice, like creamy.
The texture it gives is like, it's definitely worth a try if someone hasn't yet.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to touch base on before we jump into some of those other ones is the because you mentioned it there when we're talking about getting a lot of like nutrient dense foods in. Just your approach that resonated with us, and hence why we've worked together. That idea of like health first, like why are we so focused on health, knowing that when we've got a healthy body, it's going to function better, recover better, perform better, so that we do get the most out of our training, but rather than the other way around, when we might just focus on performance, and that's going to lead us potentially down a different avenue when we're making choices of like, am I going to have that pre-workout, or am I going to make something more natural? You know, just touch on that first, because then follow-up questions around calories will make a little bit more sense to someone.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, in terms of like long-term health and sustainability, it's focusing more on those nutrient-dense foods, because in the long run, if your body is functioning well and you're putting the right stuff in, it's going to continue to function well. However, if we're only focusing on performance, which yes, elite athletes might be doing, but if you look at some of the stuff that they're putting in their body, like you're talking about pre-workouts, really sugary foods, especially at halftime, that's really because they're there, their job is to perform, but in the long run, those aren't nutrient dense foods. If we're eating gummy bears at halftime, we can definitely fuel ourselves with a lot better options, whether that be dried fruit, because those are full of vitamins and minerals, and in the long run, that's going to help build up our body to be strong and healthy, versus just in that moment having a quick dose of energy.
Yeah. So, which sort of brings on around a lot of questions around like calories and the importance of them, and I guess we're probably we've got like let's just say like what I feel is like a bit more of a more rounded approach, and a bit more detailed approach than just saying, you know, you need to, you know, if we're thinking about health, we can't just say, because I could eat say I need 2,500 calories, just whether it is that exactly that, but just for argument's sake, say it's that. I could technically, if I'm just wanting to hit those, I could eat those with Mars bars or biscuits or whatever and hit those, but I'm going to feel awful. I'm not going to, whether the difference in my weight is going to be interesting anyway, of like other things, like how is that impacting all the functions of my body, all those hormonal functions. So, you know, even though I could create a calorie deficit, for example, with Mars bars, which might not eat very many Mars bars, and I don't know, it's be a good experiment to do, like, will I lose weight or not, because I'm still in a deficit, but I'm certainly not going to be healthy.
Right.
The question, there's a couple of sort of like calorie questions which we can there's one. Can you see these when I pop them up?
Yes.
Can you see that? Yeah. And when they say the balance won't change, what could be? I think as in the balance, like them weighing themselves, and they're not actually. So they're in a calorie. They think they're in a calorie deficit, which is potentially interesting, because you can touch on this of like, if I'm counting how do I actually know if I'm in a calorie deficit or not? Because how much my body uses and how much exercise I do and what that uses is an estimate. And then how much I say I'm eating is also an estimate. So you're like comparing estimates, and actually, you know, sometimes the amount that we need, the deficit is not like, we're not talking about having like 1,000 like calorie deficit a day. If we're talking like 200, well, that could be like a decent sized slice of bread or something. So sometimes it's not that much, but
right. Yeah, so in this case, I think it could almost be a twofold thing here. Like you talked about, everything at the end of the day is an estimate. So between what your body's putting out in terms of output, in terms of energy, is going to be very variable every single day, depending upon activity levels, just what you're doing in terms of like steps that day and work and whatnot. And then like you've touched on with food, all of it is an estimate. So even if, say, you're buying like a packaged food and you're logging that, like nutrition labels are still an estimate as well. They can be up to 20% off. So
Really?
like yeah, they actually can.
That much, 20%.
Yeah, and same with like when we are looking at food, it's making sure you're really familiar with portions, because some of us don't realize, especially like we were talking about peanut butter earlier. Someone might log, say you're logging food, you might log, oh, a serving of peanut butter. And if you really don't know what 2 tablespoons of peanut butter looks like, which is a serving size, and that's almost 200 calories, it's usually, I like to say, it's 2 thumbs. Some people will be putting in a quarter of a cup and they're like, well, I had a serving of peanut butter. And I was like, that's 2 or 3 servings right there, and they just don't realize it. So I think that can sometimes be an issue. But also on the note of, you might not see the scale changing. We talk a lot about body composition in the course as well. So sometimes, and obviously it depends upon, you kind of have to evaluate this yourself, but you might not be seeing a change in the scale, but you could potentially be losing fat or putting on muscle. So you could be seeing body comp changes, but the scale doesn't show that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess when we're talking about health as well, like the scale doesn't necessarily tell us whether I'm making improvements in my health. And it doesn't tell you whether your body composition. Yeah,
Right.
Interesting. The other stuff, someone asked before, can you explain calorie intake versus calorie expenditure? Which I guess you have touched on that. There. I think
we could note on that with the expenditure, just thinking about the different avenues that you do expend energy. So the biggest chunk being our BMR, our basal metabolic rate, meaning like what we need just to function if we sat all day, is the one way we expend energy. Physical activity, so exercises, of course, as well. And then just like your normal everyday movements. So walking up and down the stairs, going to the grocery store, walking across the parking lot. So those are really the main ways that we're expending energy as well. And then intake is fairly obvious, but.
Yeah. But people, and I'm right in thinking that I've seen plenty of stuff before where they go, what people, even when they're not trying to lie, but what they record as their actual intake is always not actually there's always stuff you forget that you actually had.
Yeah, especially when it comes to things like liquids and condiments. That's like some of the 2 biggest things. Like if you say just barbecue sauce, again, that's like a pretty sugary condiment, and some people will put it on something, they don't even think about it, but it adds up, especially if you're, say, doing a quarter of a cup. Well, there's 120, 150 calories that you just didn't even think about.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get the other question on calories. I can't find the calorie question. Well, the other one that come in that was because it was from YouTube. The other one on YouTube was about ketogenic diet, and just it was like interested in the sort of pros and cons. There was a bit of there was 2 people. One person that was very pro keto, and it was like it really helped them. It got them, from helping reverse their diabetes. And then there was someone else that was like sort of saying that not necessarily everyone should be keto. I'll let you sort of elaborate on that, but just to point out in the course that we've got, there's a whole module on specific diets, like keto is one of them, but then we go through a series of all of them where you break it down, and rather than telling someone what they have to do, you really nicely break down each one, talk about the pros and cons of each, and then sort of lay it out there to say, we need to find out what works for us, for all individuals. But specifically on keto, that's quite a popular one these days.
Yeah, that, like you said, you find people who are really passionate about it and it works really well for them, and some people are miserable on it. It's really individualized, but so the thing with keto, I would say some of the pros of it are it does focus on healthy fats. So it's high in fat, obviously. So it really is encouraging things like salmon and nuts and all those olive oils, really healthy fats, which we know are good for our brain and our heart, anti-inflammatory. So keto, is beneficial in that way. And it also, when people go keto, why and helps a lot of people, I believe, is because it cuts out a lot